Let's dive into this history. The way home. The sea did not mean to leave them behind. It simply moved on. Eliott awoke with sand in his mouth and salt stinging his eyes. His breath came shallow, his chest heavy. For a moment, the world tilted, sky, sea, shore, all turning like a compass needle shaken from its place. Then, a name rose from somewhere deep inside him. Sam? He pushed himself upright, coughing hard. His fingers scraped against pebbles and driftwood. The beach stretched around him, gray and colorless in the mist, waves folding gently over themselves, as if apologizing. Sam! He found him under a torn canvas tarp, curled tight beside a pile of crates. His coat was soaked through. One shoe missing. But his chest rose and fell. Eliott dropped to his knees beside him, touched his shoulder, felt the warmth, faint, but there. Hey! Hey, come on, wake up! Sam stirred. His eyelids fluttered open. Eliott? Yeah. You're okay. We're okay. Sam's hand was still clutching the wooden seagull, the toy he'd carved with their father weeks ago. One of its wings was cracked. But it was still whole. Somehow. Above them, gulls circled, distant and shrill. Not the cries of rescue. Just the sea, returning to its rhythm. They were alone. Beyond the dunes stood a line of crooked houses on stilts, weathered by wind, brine, and time. Nets hung like ghostly curtains. Smoke rose from one chimney. A fishing boat rocked in the harbor, but no one came running. No one knew their names. No one knew they'd survived. Eliott tried to speak to the dockworkers as they passed, men with hands like rope and eyes that squinted from sun and sea. But none spoke English. He gestured, pointed to himself and then to the sea, mimicked waves, cries, the ship lost. One man paused, watching the boys with something like recognition. He pointed inland toward a road. Port, he said. Then again. Port. They go. But what port? How far? He didn't know how to ask. By late afternoon, they were cold and hungry, crouched in the shadow of a warehouse wall. Sam sat with knees to chest, shivering inside his damp coat. Eliott had wrapped him in an old burlap sack they'd found near the docks. It smelled of fish, but it was warm enough. They didn't leave us, Sam whispered. Right? Eliott didn't answer at first. They were just taken. Ahead of us. Somehow. We'll find them? Yes. We will. He said it with more certainty than he felt, but Sam needed it. From a stack of discarded crates, Eliott had found a battered paper map, smeared with oil, half-torn, but readable. It showed roads winding along the coast and inland toward a city marked with a small drawing of a lighthouse. That had to be it. That had to be the port. Is it far? Sam asked. Yes. Will we get there? Eliott spread the map on his knees. We walk until we do. That night, the sky turned soft with cloud cover. They shared half an orange and 2 dry biscuits a man from the wharf had handed them with a nod. The man didn't speak, but he'd seen the boys and known enough. They lay under the shelter of the warehouse's eaves, listening to the distant murmur of the tide, wrapped in netting and quiet. Sam fell asleep first, one hand tucked beneath his cheek, the other resting on the seagull. Eliott stayed awake longer, staring at the slow drift of fog over the tracks. Then, in the dark, a flicker of yellow light, faint and far, caught his eye. There, beyond the last of the boats and nets, sat a rail wagon. Not moving, but warm with lamplight from within. Someone lived there. He sat up straighter, watching it carefully. A moment later, Sam stirred beside him. Eliott? I see something. What is it? A place. A light. Sam rubbed his eyes. Do you think someone there knows where we go? Eliott didn't answer right away. He looked again at the globe behind the glass. Maybe, he said. Maybe they've seen others like us. Sam reached for his seagull. Then let's go. Eliott stood, brushed the sand from his coat, and reached for Sam's hand. Stay close. I always do. And together, 2 shadows moved down the shore, following a light that might mean help, or at least, not being alone in the fog. The trees closed behind them like a curtain. Eliott led the way, one hand gently steadying his brother, the other tight around the handle of the worn satchel. Sam followed, his boots squelching through wet leaves, dragging the wooden seagull behind him by its string. It clacked softly against the stones and roots, a sound like distant wind chimes, muffled by earth and rain. They had left the edge of the village behind, stepping into a narrow path between moss-covered trunks and crooked fences that hadn't seen repair in years. Mist clung to the ground, and the scent of damp bark and smoke drifted through the air. And then they saw it. A wagon, small, wooden, weathered. It stood on rusted rails just past the tree-line, an old railcar turned into a home. A lantern hung from a metal hook beside the door, flickering yellow. A thin line of smoke curled from a crooked chimney at the top. The wagon creaked faintly in the wind, but it did not look abandoned. Eliott hesitated for just a breath, then stepped forward and knocked. At first, nothing. Then the sound of movement, a boot on wood, a rustle, a chair scraping back. The door opened. A man stood there. Older than anyone Sam had ever seen. His beard was thick and gray, curling down like ivy from his chin. A wide-brimmed hat, once brown, now faded and soft with age, rested low over his eyes. A pipe sat quietly between his fingers, unlit but familiar. He looked at them without surprise. No fear, no suspicion. Just recognition. "Rain?" he asked simply, in English touched with gravel. Eliott nodded once. The man stepped back, opening the door wider. "Well," he said, "no good in freezing. Come in, both of you." The warmth hit them like a breath held too long. Inside, the wagon smelled of smoke and dried apples. A small iron stove sat near the back wall, its belly glowing orange. Shelves lined with jars, tins, folded maps. Hooks of coats, a dented kettle. Everything old, but cared for. He motioned them toward the bench beside the stove, then hung their wet coats on a nail by the door. "Name's Bram," he said. "Used to work signals on this line. Before they shut it down. Now it's just me, and the trees, and a few trains I can still hear when the wind gets it right." Sam looked around with wide eyes, still holding his seagull. Bram placed the kettle on the stove, then set out 2 chipped cups and handed them a small cloth bundle. Dried bread and coarse salt. "Not much," he said, "but better than wet pockets." Eliott sat stiff at first, uncertain if they were intruding. But Bram wasn't watching them like guests. More like fellow travelers. After a while, Eliott spoke. He told him the story, not the whole thing, not the worst of it, but the truth. A ship. A storm. Parents missing. No papers. No names that mattered in this country. Bram listened in silence. Then, from a wooden drawer, he pulled a folded map, yellowed and creased, covered in the thin red lines of old railway threads. "Most of these don't run anymore," he said, tapping a spot with his finger. "But here. Hollow Bridge. They still pass through. Goods mostly. Steam engines, mail cars. If you make it there, someone might help. You might even hear your name again." Eliott leaned in. It looked far. But possible. Sam, quiet for most of the night, finally spoke. "Were you ever a kid?" he asked. Bram smiled. "Sure. Didn't always know where I was going either." He turned the bread over in his hand. "But I knew enough to keep going." As the fire softened and the sky darkened beyond the fogged window, Sam leaned against his brother's side, already half asleep. Bram reached over to a shelf, pulled down a small round object, a tarnished compass, and handed it to Eliott. "Doesn't always point true," he said. "But it never lets you stay still." Eliott took it carefully, as if it might vanish. "Thank you." Bram nodded once. "Get some rest. You'll need your legs in the morning." By sunrise, the fog had lifted slightly. Bram stood beside the boys as they slung on their coats, the map folded carefully inside Eliott's jacket. He pointed down a path, between trees just beginning to glow with early light. "Hollow Bridge is 2 days' walk if the weather behaves." You'll know you're close when the ground starts humming. Humming? When the rails speak. That's how you know you're not walking alone anymore. They shook hands. Sam waved, still holding the compass. And then the brothers turned toward the woods. The path ahead was narrow, but it was theirs now. The road to Hollow Bridge was long and quiet. Eliott and Sam walked for 2 days through woods that grew thinner, then across wide meadows, and finally along a narrow ridge that ran beside a forgotten stream. The sky stayed gray most of the way, but never cruel. Just soft and distant, like it wasn't quite finished becoming something. The trail was muddy in places. Their boots squelched and slipped. But they never stopped for long. Eliott carried the weight of their things, the satchel with the map, Bram's compass, the cloth bundle of bread and salt. His coat was heavier now from the mist, but he didn't complain. Sam walked behind, tugging the wooden seagull on its string. The little toy bounced behind him, wheels catching against stones and roots, wings chipping more with each mile. But Sam never let it go. "She's leading us home," he said once, as they passed through a field of silent, dew-covered grass. "She remembers the way." Eliott didn't answer. But he touched the compass inside his coat, where it swung from the cord Bram had tied, and he felt it shift slightly, not pointing north, exactly, but forward. They arrived at Hollow Bridge just as the light was leaving the sky. The station rose from the mist like something remembered by the earth itself, an old building with stone steps and stained glass windows still holding their color, even through dirt and time. Red, amber, green. They glowed faintly in the last of the day, like lanterns remembering how to burn. The station sign was cracked, but still legible, Hollow Bridge. No one else was there. Grass had taken the tracks, but the rails still shone faintly beneath the moss, steel refusing to forget its purpose. The wooden bridge that spanned the river nearby had buckled in the middle, but stood, waiting. Eliott pushed open the station door. It creaked like a memory. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Dust clung to everything, but there was no rot. Just stillness. Benches lined the walls, polished smooth by decades of waiting. A great iron clock hung above the door, its hands frozen at 5:42. No ticking. No chime. But no fear either. They explored in silence. In the old office, Eliott found a desk with a cracked leather blotter and beneath it, a newspaper, not ancient, but recent. Just 2 days old. One headline had been circled in pencil. Route number 7 resumes, 1 steam engine. 1 car. 1 stop. Saturdays only. Eliott looked at the date. Then at the sky outside. "Sam," he said, showing him the page. "It's Friday." Sam's eyes widened. "We're right on time?" "Maybe," Eliott said. "If we wait." That night, the rain returned. Not heavy, but soft, a hush against the old roof, as if the sky were speaking through water. They wrapped themselves in an old canvas Eliott found in a supply cupboard. The room grew darker, but not cold. They sat side by side, chewing the last of their bread and sipping from a canteen filled at a rain barrel. "Have you ever been on a rail steam train?" Sam asked. "No. I heard you can feel them," Sam whispered. "Through your feet. Before you hear them." Eliott nodded, eyes closed. "I've heard that too." Later, as Sam slept, Eliott wandered the room one last time, running his hand along the wood panels. His foot hit something beneath the floorboards, hollow. He pulled up a loose plank and found a wooden box, aged but intact. Inside, a small stack of sheet music, brittle but beautiful. And next to them, a tiny mechanical crank instrument. He wound it. A melody emerged. Simple. Worn smooth by time. A lullaby. It played softly in the dim room, echoing off the glass like a memory. Sam stirred, but didn't wake. Eliott placed the box near his brother and lay back against the bench, listening as the music faded into the ticking silence. And then, something new. In the middle of the night, Sam sat upright, his eyes wide in the dark. "Eliott?" Eliott was already at the door, coat on, hand on the compass. "You heard it too," Sam whispered. A distant whistle. Soft but certain. A sound not of dream, but of direction. Eliott opened the station door. Fog rolled in around them, cool and quiet. The rails, far down the slope, gleamed faintly in the dark. "It's coming," Eliott said. He turned toward his brother, eyes calm. "We have to be ready." And in that moment, the ground beneath them began to hum. Not much. Just enough to know they weren't alone anymore. Morning arrived with the sound of damp leaves sighing in the breeze. The station was still cloaked in mist. Pale light filtered through the stained glass windows, scattering soft colors across the dusty floor. Everything was quiet, not empty, but hushed, like the air itself was holding its breath. Eliott woke before dawn. He gently shook Sam's shoulder. The boy stirred, blinked sleep from his eyes, then sat up slowly, still holding the wooden seagull tucked under his arm like a compass of dreams. They packed their things without speaking. There wasn't much to gather. The map. Bram's compass. A tin cup. A little pouch of lavender Sam had kept from the wagon. That, and hope, folded carefully between their hands. The platform was wet from rain, dark with age. Eliott and Sam stood side by side, their boots just touching the edge of the wooden slats. The forest beyond the rails was silent. No birds yet. No breeze. Only the long, empty reach of the tracks ahead. They waited. Minutes passed like clouds drifting. And just when it began to feel like nothing would come, it began. A hum in the ground. A far-off rumble, like a voice beneath the earth. Then a whistle. Low. Long echoing between trees. Sam gripped Eliott's sleeve. Eliott said nothing, just stared ahead. And through the fog it came. A black steam engine. Tall, gleaming faintly beneath soot. Its single carriage rolled behind it, wooden, worn, but strong. The wheels screeched faintly as they slowed, and steam billowed in soft white curtains across the tracks. It didn't roar. It arrived, like something pulled from memory. The door of the carriage opened with a clack. A conductor stepped down, tall, thin, wearing a faded dark coat with silver buttons, and a wide hat tilted slightly forward. His mustache twitched when he spoke. "Eastbound," he said simply. 3 stops. Then the end. He looked at the brothers, as if he'd been expecting them. Eliott nodded. Sam clutched his seagull. They climbed aboard. Inside, the air smelled of coal, old wood, and something softer, like thyme or pressed flowers. There were only a few others in the carriage. A woman in a shawl held a basket filled with wildflowers, purple and white, still damp with dew. Across from her, a man scribbled into a notebook, pausing now and then to glance out the window. Near the back, a small girl sat alone with a scuffed suitcase. The handle was missing. She held it in her lap with both arms, as if it carried something precious. Eliott and Sam sat near the rear, close to the window. The glass was fogged slightly. The benches creaked. Everything felt old, but clean, as though well remembered. The train moved. Not with a jolt, but like water being drawn forward. The rhythm settled into their bones. The whistle called once, then quieted. For a while, no one spoke. Sam leaned his head against Eliott's shoulder. The woman with the basket reached across the aisle and gently placed a small cloth pouch into Sam's lap. "For you," she said softly. He looked up, confused. "Lavender," she added. "The smell of home, even if you're not there yet." Sam smiled, pressed the pouch to his face, then tucked it into his coat. The man with the notebook looked over his wire-rimmed glasses. "You heading somewhere?" he asked Eliott. "Or running from something?" Eliott considered the question for a long moment. Then answered, "We're going home. We just don't know where that is yet." The man nodded once, then returned to his page. The train rolled on. They passed old villages, forgotten signs, fields silvered with early frost. At the second stop, a wooden post marked by a weathered lantern, the woman with the flowers stepped off, followed by the little girl. The wind shifted slightly. Just before the doors closed, the conductor stepped forward. He handed Eliott a folded piece of thick, cream-colored paper. On it, drawn in blue ink, was a sun and a river. No words. Just the image. When the time comes, the conductor said, show this. They'll understand. Then he stepped back. The doors closed. The train moved again. Inside, the light grew warmer. Outside, the mist began to thin. Sam's breathing grew slower. He leaned against Eliott, the seagull resting in his lap. The rhythm of the train, steady and soft, cradled them both. Eliott looked out the window. As the fog parted, he saw a sign flash past. Stone City. A place he'd never heard of. But something about it felt like a turning. He whispered, almost to himself, this isn't the end. Then softer. But maybe someone there knows something. Where cobblestones remember every footstep, and even smoke carries someone's name. The train exhaled a long breath as it came to a stop. Steam rose and curled across the platform, folding around shoes, satchels, and the low murmur of city voices. Eliott stepped down first, then reached back for Sam. The boy's eyes were wide, not with fear, but wonder. This place was loud, alive, and strange. The station loomed above them, all iron girders, glass ceilings, and clocks that ticked like heartbeats. People moved quickly here. Men in long coats with walking sticks, women with parcels tucked under their arms, children darting past like autumn leaves in a wind. The air smelled of coal, ink, warm bread, and something sharper, like metal being shaped. Sam held tight to his brother's sleeve. Eliott held tighter to the small paper ticket in his coat, the one the conductor had pressed into his palm. No words. Just a drawing of a river and a sun. They had no idea what to do with it. A man in uniform stood near one of the station arches. His cap sat low on his head, and a brass badge gleamed faintly against the soft gray of his coat. Eliott stepped toward him. The man looked down as Eliott held out the paper. He took it wordlessly. Studied it for a long moment. Then, without a change in expression, handed it back. You'll want Postman Street, he said, in a slow, gravel-soft voice. Registries down there still takes these. His eyes flicked once to Sam, and softened. Don't lose it. The city opened beyond the gates of the station. It rose in layers, alleyways, arches, rooftops so close together they looked like they whispered. Every wall was stone. Every step echoed. Gas lamps flickered even in daylight, and chimneys coughed lazy threads of smoke into the cool air. Eliott walked ahead with the map folded in one hand. It was rough and marked only major roads. It didn't show what the brothers felt, the weight of eyes, the size of buildings, the distance between questions and answers. Sam stayed close. They passed windows full of ticking clocks, mechanical animals, glass jars filled with dried ink. Sam stopped in front of one shop, watching a small brass automaton sketching circles onto a page. This city looks hard, he said softly. But not mean. Eliott looked at him, surprised. Yeah, he replied. It does. It took longer than they expected to find it. Postman Street was narrow, tucked between a leather shop and an old shuttered bakery. Its bricks were darker than the others, worn from weather and wheel. And in the center of the block stood a small wooden building with a faded blue sign. Station of Letters and Tickets. Eliott opened the door. A bell chimed once, soft, like a distant thought. The inside smelled of wax, parchment, and the sharpness of ink. A single man sat behind a wooden desk, flipping through a heavy ledger. He wore a wool vest, round glasses, and looked up slowly, not surprised, just expectant. Eliott approached, laying the ticket gently on the counter. The man adjusted his spectacles, studied the drawing, then turned to the thick ledger and began turning pages. At last he paused. There was one inquiry, he said. Several weeks ago. Looking for two boys. One older. One younger, with a wooden bird. Sam inhaled sharply. His hand clutched Eliott's. The man reached beneath the counter and drew out a thick, carefully sealed envelope. Its paper was soft at the corners but intact. A wax crest, faded but present, sealed the flap. On the front, in careful ink, If they arrive, give this without delay. We await them in Port Rhea. Eliott broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten, familiar. The curve of the lines. The tilt of the A. We are alive. You are strong, my son. Go east. We will find each other. Mama and Papa. On the back of the page, a pencil sketch, a simple seagull, with small wings and uneven lines. Sam's eyes welled, but he didn't cry. He reached forward, touched the page. I drew that for her, he whispered. Before we left. She still has it. Eliott folded the letter carefully, pressing it to his chest. Outside, the light had changed. The clouds had broken slightly, and the edges of the street gleamed with silver. They walked again, neither rushing nor lost. Eastward now. No trains ran often in that direction. The road would be slow, winding, but not impossible. Eliott glanced down at his brother. We're closer now. Sam looked up, smiling softly. I'm your compass. Eliott returned the smile. And the seagull? Our map. And the city, though made of stone, felt suddenly full of open doors. They left the city of stone in the blue stillness before dawn. The streets were hushed, the gas lamps still glowing softly along the alleys, and behind them, the tall buildings faded into silence. Ahead stretched the open road, eastward, unpaved and uncertain, but theirs to follow. The world changed slowly. Stone gave way to earth. Smoke gave way to clean air. Grass grew between the old brick paths, and after a mile or two, the bricks gave up entirely to dirt and cobble, worn smooth by carts, hooves, and time. They walked quietly. Fields opened on either side, long, gentle slopes painted with the soft gold of harvested wheat and patches of rust-colored weeds swaying in the wind. A flock of birds rose suddenly from a thicket, wheeled once, then vanished into the sky. Windmills turned slowly in the distance, their sails moving like the hands of a great clock that had forgotten to rush. Eliott walked with steady focus. He checked Bram's compass at intervals, aligning their path with the tilt of the morning sun. Though he didn't speak much, his eyes never strayed far from the trail, or from Sam. Every few minutes he'd glance back, silently counting his brother's footsteps. Sam, for his part, was light on his feet. He made up songs as they went, spoke aloud to the seagull toy trailing behind him on a bit of twine, and invented tales about the landscape. About trees that whispered names, stones that remembered footsteps, and rivers that hummed when you walked in the right direction. At one point he said, I think the seagull is leading us to a secret map. Not one you fold, one that's buried under the ground. And on it, our home glows like a lighthouse. That's how it calls us. Eliott smiled faintly. Let's keep walking toward the light then. By evening, their legs were sore, and the bread they'd brought from the city was nearly gone. They found shelter in the remains of an old cottage just off the road, roof sagging but intact, walls half covered in moss, but enough of a room to keep them dry. Inside was a wooden bench and a broken drawerless cabinet. Through a window with no glass, they watched the sun fall behind a line of distant trees. They ate the last apple and tore the bread between them, then curled together beneath Eliott's coat. The floor creaked beneath them, but it held. Sam couldn't sleep. What if we don't find them? He asked into the darkness. His voice was soft, not fearful, just small. Eliott didn't answer right away. I didn't promise we'd find them, he said at last. But I promised you'd never be alone. Sam moved closer, head resting near Eliott's ribs. His breath evened out. Sleep came slowly, but it came. Eliott stayed awake a while longer, watching the sky through the broken window. In the hour before dawn, something stirred outside. A footstep. Soft. Deliberate. Eliott rose quietly and took up the walking stick they'd whittled together. He stepped into the clearing. A figure stood there, tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, a lantern in one hand and a pack slung across one shoulder. I mean no harm, the man said, seeing the stick. His voice was dry but calm. Just passing through. From the sea to the mountains. He introduced himself as Mr. Keene. His coat was patched, boots worn, and a journal peeked from his pocket, thick with folded pages. "I collect dreams," Keen said. "People forget them too easily. I write them down. Sometimes, a dream carries more truth than a map." He sat by the stone well near the cottage and flipped through his book, humming softly. Then paused. "A woman," he said. "From a lighthouse. She dreamed of a boy carrying a seagull. She said, 'He's coming. And he's not alone.'" Eliott tensed. "What woman?" Keen shook his head. "She didn't give a name. But her dreams were sharp. Clear. She remembered things others forget." He stood slowly. "Your road's not done," he said. "But it's drawing near." He turned to Sam, who had woken quietly and now stood near the doorway. "For you," Keen said gently. He handed Sam a small tin whistle, shaped like a seagull. "Blow it once. But only when you don't need to find someone, only when you need them to find you." And with that, Keen walked into the early morning light and disappeared down the road. That day, the path curved gently through the hills. They passed wheat fields and low stone walls, heard the distant creak of cart wheels, and watched a fox dart into a thicket. Late in the afternoon, Sam looked up and pointed. High above them, a gull floated, wings spread wide, gliding eastward, slow, certain, silent. He smiled without speaking. Eliott followed the bird's arc with his eyes, then nodded slowly. "We're closer," he whispered. "I feel it." As the sun began to fall again, the river appeared, wide, calm, catching the light in shimmering bands. And beyond it, rising from the bank, a wooden tower. Sam's voice was soft, sure. "That's the ferry." Eliott adjusted his pack. "And maybe," he said, "our last ticket home." The river arrived like a memory. It didn't roar or rush. It simply appeared, wide, dark, and slow, winding through the land like a ribbon drawn in ink. It reflected the overcast sky with perfect stillness, disturbed only by the occasional drift of a leaf or a soft ring of ripples, as if something unseen had touched it lightly. Eliott and Sam stood at the crest of a hill, staring down at the pier. The path beneath them crunched with dry grass and stones. Neither spoke. Below, a wooden ferry sat at the water's edge. It rocked gently, tied to a leaning dock with frayed rope. The sails had long since been drawn up and fastened, their fabric hanging in folds that swayed like sleeping wings. To one side of the dock stood a squat wooden house, weathered by sun, water, and years. A crooked sign swung above the door. "Riverline Crossing." Sam clutched his wooden seagull tightly. His eyes scanned the river and the boat and the sky. "It looks like something from a dream," he whispered. "Like we're not supposed to talk loud here." Eliott nodded, watching the building. The door opened with a creak that matched the hush of the river. A man stepped out. Tall, wiry, dressed in a long dark coat. His eyes were pale, his features lined but calm. He moved like someone who had spent his life listening to water. When he spoke, his voice was low, not raspy, but weighted, like something carved in wood. "Only two of you?" he asked, as if confirming something he already knew. Eliott nodded. The man, Mr. Farron, as a plaque on the door confirmed, looked toward the opposite shore. "The current still knows the way," he murmured. "That helps." Eliott stepped forward. "How much for the crossing?" Farron looked at him a moment longer. Then, gently, "You were paid. Before your journey even began." Without another word, he turned and stepped back into the house. The brothers followed. Inside, the space was warm with candlelight. The floor was uneven, the furniture handmade. The room smelled of old paper, dried herbs, and faintly, of lavender. Mr. Farron reached to a high shelf and pulled down a small wrapped package. "This arrived some time ago," he said. "She told me you'd come." He handed it to Eliott, who recognized the handwriting instantly, his mother's looping, careful script. "For my boys. When the water finds you." His hands trembled slightly as he untied the string. Inside, a pair of new woolen socks. A bundle of dried meat. a folded letter creased but lovingly pressed. And at the very bottom, a strip of blue ribbon, like the one their mother had worn in her hair. Eliott opened the letter, and read aloud by candlelight. Asterisk. My Eliott. My Sam. If you're reading this, then you've crossed everything I feared, and everything I trusted. We are waiting in Port Ria. Every morning, your father stands at the shore and watches the water. He doesn't say much. But he says this. They're coming. I believe it too. I'm proud of you. Keep going. You're closer than you know. Mama. Asterisk. Sam stood quietly, his fingers brushing the edge of the letter, then the ribbon. Mr. Farron said nothing, but nodded toward the back of the house. There's one more thing, he said. Someone asked to see you. He opened the door, and Miss Spilden like breath. There, standing just beyond the threshold, was the girl from the train, the one with the wide-brimmed white hat, the broken suitcase, the soft eyes. She stepped forward in silence, and pressed a small card into Sam's hand. It was a drawing of a lighthouse. Faintly smudged, but clear. She smiled once, then turned and disappeared into the fog as if she had always belonged to it. Sam stared after her, blinking slowly. Then looked at the card. She knew, he whispered. The ferry bell rang once, a soft chime, almost accidental. Mr. Farron nodded to the boat. It's time. The ferry slipped into the water like a sigh. No sound of engines. No oars. The river itself seemed to carry them, gently, as if it had waited years to do so. The mist thinned as they crossed. Trees stood tall on both banks, silent sentinels. A gull flew overhead, not carved, not imagined, but real. Its cry echoed once, then faded. Sam leaned into Eliott's side. They said nothing. They didn't need to. Eliott closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the letter in his pocket, the ribbon tucked safely beside it. When he opened them again, the opposite shore was near. And rising just beyond the field, as sure and solid as hope, stood a lighthouse. Sam breathed. That's it. I know it. Eliott nodded slowly. Then we're almost home. The path up the hill was narrow, but soft underfoot, worn smooth by rain and time, curving through tufts of golden grass that swayed in the wind like sleeping breath. The river behind them was now a line of silver, winding through fields that had already forgotten the ferry. The ferry itself was gone, silent again, back into the mist. Ahead, rising from the earth like a quiet promise, stood the lighthouse. Its stone was white, but streaked with years of weather. The base was wide, rooted into a ring of rock. It didn't shine with brilliance, not during the day, but even in the bright afternoon, the lens at the top flickered faintly, not like a warning, but like something alive. It pulsed slow and soft, like the heartbeat of the land itself. Next to it stood a small cottage. Its shutters were painted blue, peeling in places. Vines climbed the walls, and an herb garden stretched along one side, rosemary, lavender, chamomile. Wind chimes made of glass and seashells clinked gently in the breeze. There was a sense of deep stillness here. Not emptiness, presence. Sam paused on the path and looked up at the lighthouse. It feels like the sky is closer here, he said. And even in the daylight, the light's still on. Eliott didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the figure sitting on the cottage porch. It was a woman, elderly, perhaps 60, dressed simply in a pale shawl and long skirt. A white scarf wrapped around her hair, and her hands rested quietly in her lap. Her face was turned toward them, though her eyes didn't seem to follow. They were open, but unseeing. She smiled gently. You came, she said, not as a question. You were always coming. Eliott stopped, confused. Do you know who we are? She shook her head. Not by name. But the light told me someone was coming. It only shines for those who are expected. She rose slowly and motioned for them to come closer. You've walked far. Let the wind rest. Come in. They followed her inside. The cottage was small but warm. Wooden floorboards creaked underfoot. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of dried herbs, weathered books, bundles of letters tied in twine, and a row of polished stones. The scent of tea, dust, and old paper filled the room. "My name is Mrs. Lien," she said, as she set the kettle on a small iron stove. "I was once a postkeeper for this lighthouse, long ago. Before I lost my sight." Sam tilted his head. "But you still see things?" She smiled. "I see what I need to. The rest I feel. And the lighthouse sees enough for both of us." They sat on the floor around a low table. Mrs. Lien poured tea into mismatched cups and handed them a plate of lemon biscuits that crumbled softly at the touch. For a while, there were no questions. Only the soft sound of wind and spoon against porcelain. Mrs. Lien told stories. Of ships that came to shore only once in a generation, of children born with salt on their skin, of letters that arrived before they were ever sent. Sam listened with his eyes wide. Then, without ceremony, she reached beneath the table and placed an envelope in front of Eliott. No name, no seal. Only a small circle drawn on the front, with rays like a sun. "From the light," she said softly. Eliott opened it. The paper inside was soft, the ink familiar. It was their mother's handwriting, curved, deliberate. "Your road has shaped you. And that is good. You are not the boy who left home. You are the one who is needed now. Keep going. You are nearly held." Eliott's eyes stung. He folded the letter slowly, holding it in both hands. "She wrote this," he whispered. Mrs. Lien nodded. "Some letters wait. Some arrive before they're written." Before they left, she opened a small carved box and placed something in Sam's palm. A small pendant, glass framed in copper, glowing faintly blue. "Inside," she said, "is a sliver of light from the lamp above. It remembers every step you've taken." Sam looked down at it. "What do I do with it?" "Keep it close," she said. "Especially when you feel far away." They stood at the door a while longer. The wind had shifted. The sky was pale, softening into the colors of evening. On the far horizon, a new shape emerged, a glint of sea, clustered rooftops, the rise of a port tower. "Port Rhea." Eliott squinted into the light. "We're almost there." But Sam only smiled, holding the pendant to his chest. "I know," he said. "The lighthouse showed us." And behind them, the light blinked once more, steady, soft, and waiting. The road from the lighthouse bent downward, sloping through golden grass and into the scent of salt and sea. Eliott and Sam walked without urgency for the first time in what felt like years. The journey had carved silence into them, not emptiness, but a deep, still kind of knowing. Their feet knew what to do. Their eyes scanned the horizon, but they no longer needed to ask where they were going. They were almost there. The town revealed itself gradually, a scatter of red roofs, then a glint of water, and finally, as they came closer, cobbled streets, colorful awnings, nets hung to dry, and signs written in the curved script of seaside traders. Everything smelled of salt and baking bread. Sam was the first to speak. "It feels like I've been here in a dream." Eliott glanced over, then nodded. "Or like we carried a piece of it with us the whole way." The harbor bustled, but it wasn't loud. Just alive. Fishermen unloaded crates with practiced rhythm. Children played with sticks in puddles left by the tide. A woman sang softly while hanging laundry. Someone tuned an old accordion on a step. No one seemed surprised by two boys walking in from the hills. At the dock, Eliott approached a man coiling ropes near the water. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know where I might find Rodan and Elena Marlowe?" The man looked up. His brow lifted slightly, then softened. "You're theirs, aren't you?" he said. "They've been here a few days now. Their boat's the one near the red buoy." He wiped his hands on a cloth and pointed down the road. "But right now, you'll find them in the bakery. Just there, with the blue door." Eliott turned. The bakery sat tucked between two old stone buildings, ivy climbing its walls. The blue door stood open, the smell of warm sugar and yeast drifting out like music. His heart stumbled once in his chest. Sam looked up at him. "Can I go first?" Eliott hesitated, then nodded. Sam ran. The wooden seagull thumped lightly against his side. He crossed the square with quick, eager steps and disappeared through the bakery's door, a bell ringing above him. Eliott followed slowly, one hand resting over his chest where the old note from the lighthouse lay folded in his coat. Inside, the light was golden. Wooden shelves held rows of fresh loaves. A kettle hissed on the back stove. At the counter stood a woman in a flour-dusted apron, her hair tied in a scarf. She turned at the sound of the bell. And then she saw him, not Eliott yet, but Sam, standing in the doorway, breathless, clutching the seagull. Her breath caught. She dropped her towel. "Sam?" He ran forward. "Mom!" She met him halfway, dropping to her knees on the warm tiled floor, gathering him into her arms with a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She rocked him gently, whispering something only he could hear. Behind her, a man stepped into view, tall, quiet, weather-worn. His hands were rough from rope and salt, his eyes shadowed from searching. Rodan. He watched for only a moment before moving toward the door. Eliott stood just inside the threshold. They met not with words, but with eyes. A long breath passed between them. Rodan placed both hands on Eliott's shoulders. They stood like that for a moment. Then Rodan pulled him in, no questions, no explanations. Just an embrace that said, "You came back. And I never stopped looking." That evening, the sun stretched low across the water. They sat on a bench near the docks, watching ships drift lazily in the harbor. The sails glowed pale pink in the fading light. The sky smelled of salt and sugar and memory. Elena kneaded dough at a small outdoor table beside them. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows. Rodan sat nearby, splicing rope, the same hands now steady with purpose. Sam drew in a notebook, the lighthouse, the river, a gull in flight. Eliott leaned back, feeling the breeze move across his face. He reached into his pocket and found the folded paper, the note he hadn't read yet. It had fallen between pages, forgotten. He unfolded it now. Asterisk. Even when the light goes dark, it remembers who it shined for. And one day, when it's needed, it will shine again. Asterisk. Eliott closed his eyes. There were no lanterns lit yet. But he didn't need them. He looked at his family. At the sea. And thought. Home isn't where you arrive. It's who you arrive with. The sky over Port Ria darkened into deep velvet. Stars came out, one by one, until they filled the air above the harbor with soft, flickering breath. The sea was still, not silent, but calm, like a sleeping chest rising and falling. Lanterns swayed from their hooks along the dock, casting soft, golden halos onto the water. Far off, the lighthouse blinked once, then again, slow and steady, its light tracing a memory across the waves. On a low wooden platform near the end of the pier, 4 figures sat together, cross-legged, elbow to elbow, around a simple cloth laid out like a feast. Hot bread, torn in halves. A pot of porridge, thick with herbs and salt. A tin kettle steeping wild tea gathered on the hillsides. It was the kind of food that didn't need seasoning to feel like home. Sam grinned between bites, his cheeks full, his laugh easy. His seagull rested beside his plate like an old friend finally invited to dinner. Elena, their mother, reached over and rested her hand on Eliott's shoulder. Her palm was warm. Steady. "You did more than any of us could have," she said softly. "You found the way. And you didn't lose yourself along the road." Eliott didn't know what to say. But he looked up at her and nodded, once, and it was enough. Later, the town grew quieter. The windows along the waterfront glowed faintly, shutters drawn against the breeze. Even the sea made less noise now, the waves lapping gently like a lullaby. One by one, the voices of the day dimmed, and the stars deepened overhead. Eliott sat alone at the edge of the dock. His legs dangled just above the water, and his elbows rested on his knees. In the distance, the lighthouse blinked its rhythm, always watching, always remembering. He didn't notice the footsteps until his father sat beside him. Rodan didn't speak right away. He just sat, the creak of the boards beneath them the only sound between. Then, in a voice low and even, he said, "I never knew how to teach you strength. I thought maybe it was something you had to earn. But you learned it better than I ever did." He paused. "And you didn't forget how to be kind. That's the harder part." Eliott said nothing. Instead, he reached into his pocket and drew out Bram's compass. He opened it and placed it gently on the dock. The needle didn't move. It rested in the center, not pointing north, not pointing home. It simply stayed where they were. And for once, Eliott didn't feel the need to fix it. Maybe that was the point. Later still, as the night edged closer to sleep, Sam approached. He was barefoot now, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. His seagull tucked in one hand. He stood beside Eliott and looked up at the stars. "Do you think we've arrived?" he asked. Eliott looked over. "We found the people we were looking for." Sam nodded, then added, "But what if someone else ever gets lost like we did?" Eliott smiled. "Then maybe we help them," he said. "The way others helped us." Sam leaned against his side, and together they watched the water, their breaths slow and quiet. No more needed to be said. The morning arrived gently. The sky pinked slowly, the harbor stretching awake with the long sigh of tide and sun. A few boats bobbed softly, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from town again like a promise. Eliott woke in his small room above the bakery, where they had stayed the night. On his pillow, beside the folded blanket, was a small paper figure. A seagull, carefully creased from parchment, its wings outstretched. He picked it up, turned it over. No note. No signature. He asked his family at breakfast. No one had left it. No one said they had seen it. But everyone smiled. Maybe it was a thank you. Or a reminder. That the road still remembered them. That afternoon, a ship was leaving the harbor, bound for another coast, another chapter. The family stood on the dock once more. Sam pointed excitedly at the sails. Rodan checked the cargo. Elena held a basket of bread and dried tea for the journey. But Eliott lingered at the edge. His mother came to his side. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," she said gently. "We could stay." Eliott looked out at the water. Then down at the paper seagull in his hand. Then at his family. "I think," he said quietly, "home isn't a place on a map. It's who you carry with you." Elena smiled. "Then let's go together." And this time, no one led. They all walked forward. As equals. As one. The ship moved slowly through the silver morning. Its sails caught the soft wind, and the hull hummed quietly beneath their feet, not with urgency, but with certainty. The horizon ahead was wide and pale, the sea flat as glass. Behind them, Port Rhea still shimmered faintly on the edge of the world. Only the lighthouse remained sharp, blinking once, like a final nod. Then fading into distance. The four of them stood at the railing, wrapped in soft coats and silence. Elena's scarf fluttered around her shoulders as she watched the shoreline drift away. Rodan leaned quietly on the rail, hands clasped. Sam leaned against him, holding the wooden seagull close, its paint now worn smooth as river stones. And Eliott stood beside them, Bram's compass resting in his hand, closed but still warm. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The sea was saying enough. A pair of gulls circled once overhead, then veered toward shore, disappearing over the masts. The breeze was gentle, cool, touched with salt and something faintly sweet, perhaps the last breath of rosemary from the lighthouse hill. Eliott exhaled slowly. No longer in search. Only present. Later, below the sails, the family sat in a patch of sunlight that moved slowly across the deck. Elena pulled a folded letter from her coat pocket, something she'd found in Rodan's bag the night before. The paper was slightly creased, the ink faded, but the handwriting still clear. She opened it and began to read aloud, her voice soft and steady. To the family of Eliott and Sam Marlowe. You may not know us, but we remember. Your sons came through this city like lanterns in fog, carrying each other. Carrying something more than survival. They reminded us what it means to walk forward, even when the road disappears. They didn't ask to be known, but they left light behind. That matters. Elena paused. Rodin nodded once. Just once. Then looked toward Eliott. His eyes held no questions, no burden, only something older. Something proud. And something deeply, deeply grateful. As morning grew stronger, the sun rose higher into the sky, casting gold along the surface of the sea. Sam had fallen asleep again, curled beneath a soft gray blanket near the bow, the seagull toyed beside him like a silent watchman. Eliott stood alone now, hands resting on the railing. He reached into his coat, felt the soft edge of the note from the lighthouse, the one he'd kept through storm and frost, through fields and firelight. He unfolded it one last time. Asterisk. You are not the one who left home, but you are the one they needed. And now you know the way. Asterisk. He read it slowly, folded it again, and slipped it back into his pocket beside the compass. This time, he didn't open the compass. He didn't need to check the needle. He knew. A gentle song rose behind him. It was his mother, humming softly, her voice weaving a lullaby into the wind. It was a song she used to sing in their old kitchen, long ago. The words didn't matter. The melody was enough. Eliott turned and walked to Sam, who stirred but didn't wake. He sat beside his brother, and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The ship rocked slowly beneath them, carrying them forward through open water. We're already home, Eliott whispered. Even if we're still sailing. Sam shifted slightly in his sleep, as if hearing. The gull above them cried once, then was quiet again. And so, the ship moved on. Not toward a final destination, but toward a new chapter. A place where home was not a single point, but something shared, held between people like warmth in the dark. The sea widened around them, soft and endless. In the final light of morning, the ship left a